Di Maria, Lionel Messi, Messi's hitting! Oh! That's what they came for!
This could be the most dramatic story of the season. It's Torres to give Chelsea a place in the Champions League final.
Hey, yeah, not too bad. It's been all right. So it's pretty nice, the weather over here in Britain, isn't it? So it's all positive.
Yeah, well, it's up and down, isn't it? It's like yesterday it was peeing it down. Well, it
Oh,
was here.
really?
Yeah. So it's nice weather if you're a duck.
Yeah, it's all right for them, mate. But yeah, it seems to be all right right now. I was driving home earlier and it looked like it was going to hammer down. So it still looks all right from the window here. So it's nice just to have a little bit of a positive vibe because I do hear the wet British weather is on its way back for a few weeks over here.
Yeah, I think that's a concern, isn't it? Need to top up the tan.
I'd add even more to your boyish good looks, mate.
Cheers.
That's right, mate. No worries at all. Well, usually we record on a Tuesday evening, but obviously things happen every now and then, so we just move it around, which is good. So here we are, Saturday night recording, an hour to go until the Champions League kick off. So we're going to get this episode recorded and we're going to do it within an hour's time, so we're in time for kick off ourselves as well. So a lot's been happening, and it's sort of been a good that we've had a delay in a way, because there's been a lot of confirmations in between not chatting from where they were rumours, say, Tuesday morning to confirmations now. So what are your thoughts upon how the week's gone in terms of what you've seen in terms of the news, the media, sort of the manager merry-go-round from last week, and just some of the things you've seen?
It's just been a mad week, hasn't it? I mean, with Kompany, we was expecting, wasn't we? We've got him going to Bayern after we was chatting in our last episode. But then it came as a bit of a shock and surprise, really, that Maresca has been given for green light for Chelsea job now as well. But I think, as you said, and summed it up really well last week, Luca, when you said, with football, that's the beautiful thing about it. Every single week, there's always talking points, you know?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And that's what I mean. Every time I think of preparing for our episode, there's so much that I want to cram into it, but I'm actually like, oh, that's going to be a standalone episode, because one of the things I want to chat about is the England squad, and especially with the arrivals of this week, the squad going up, and obviously they're going to choose from the 30-man squad and trim it down by another 7 players. I want to do that in its own entity and not sort of bypass it, but have its own standalone episode, because I think there's a lot to sort of consider and analyze in that, and I really want to piece that together in a good episode with you from your knowledge as well. But the big game is coming up in an hour's time. We're going to look at that in a little bit, but we're just going to cover some of the content from the week and build upon what you've said there. So starting with our managerial merry-go-round, and the first man which is to move and have a confirmation is one of your former bosses, Antonio Conte. So he adds to the list of Napoli coaches who've gone in, and it seems to be a very exciting appointment. Like, when I saw this, I thought, you know what, this is a great move for Napoli, and what a great appointment. I don't know what your thoughts are, being a Spurs fan, and whether your hearts are still trashed by him.
No, I actually think that is a very good, shrewd appointment for Napoli, and I think that that level of football, that standard of football, and to get Napoli on for rise again, I think Conte could be the right man.
I think so as well, mate, because they tend to have a list of previous managers. So this is dating from 2009, right? So we got Walter Mazzarri, he's the first manager from 2009. Then they go to Rafa Benitez, Maurizio Sarri. So obviously Benitez ex-Chelsea, Sarri ex-Chelsea, Carlo Ancelotti ex-Chelsea. 2 of those are ex-Real Madrid managers. Sarri obviously went and managed Juve as well. So did Ancelotti. Rafa managed Inter Milan, and so did Mazzarri. They went and appointed Gennaro Gattuso, Luciano Spalletti, who went initially to take on that year's sabbatical after completely winning the league with Napoli, and they went into the Italian national team job, which was a surprise for some. Then they went for Rudy Garcia, who obviously was in charge of Al Nassr and then got sacked when Ronaldo was appointed. I didn't think much of that appointment when he went to Napoli. Going from Spalletti to Garcia, okay, Garcia's got Some of a good background. He's won some cups in his time, but I don't think he's a world beater. And I don't think replacing Spalletti onto Garcia was a good move. Then they went for Maserati back this season, and then they went for Calzona, which is the Slovakia manager, as an interim. So I think this is a true upgrade from Calzona and Marazzi and Garcia. So I think this is really going to elevate, Napoli up towards the Inter Milan and how they're doing with Inzaghi. Obviously, AC Milan are going to have a new appointment. Conte now at Napoli. Then you've got AS Roma and whether they decide to keep De Rossi. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time for Italian football. I think he's a good appointment because, a couple of years' time, he could be on the move again. But I'm a big fan of Conte as a Chelsea fan, as an ex-boss of ours. And when we sacked Posh the other week, I would have put him back on my candidates for managers at Chelsea.
Yeah, no, I think, it'd be a very interesting time for Italian football, for Serie A. Even though I was just reading that potentially a 3-year deal for Conte as well, that's unusual for him, isn't it, to knuckle down to even longer than a 2-year deal or whatever, to agree a 3. It shows that there's a project in tow, I think.
I think he's like a bit of a Mourinho, isn't he? He's a big character, which you either like him or you dislike him, right? And he can be a serial winner, and he can have a good times, and he can bring very bad times with him as well. So that toxicity, which we sort of experience when that sort of segment happens, is I think there's a point between Conte and Mourinho now, where they're trying to rebuild themselves in a bit, and they're trying to get to a point where they have to knuckle down to some projects now to try and elevate themselves, to try and take themselves a little bit more forward. And how they build upon that is they need to sort of resemble themselves back now at a new project.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I think Conte's the right man for that.
Absolutely.
I think with Spurs, really, he didn't get given enough time as such at Spurs. When I say didn't get given enough time, that might sound really daft, but it was quite a it was he got us top 4 football. But I think it was just that little outburst that he had at Spurs that really Levy didn't appreciate. But I wouldn't have been against it. This is it. Conte needs backing wherever he goes, and that shows with the likes of Mourinho and so forth. However, it just showed that it wasn't really a good fit for Conte and Levy to work together at Spurs, because Levy just doesn't do that. So I think this with Napoli will get some funds behind him, it'll get them back into European football, and I think they could become quite a good force actually, and do really well in their projects that they're hoping to achieve.
I think so, mate. And moving on to ex-Chelsea managers, the next one, which I was quite surprised at, but also it's sort of grown upon me in the last 24 hours, is Jose Mourinho going to Fenerbahce. Obviously in Turkey, they finished second last year. A 2-year deal, which is sensible for the Turkish giants, and there is an option of that 3rd year, but sort of similar to that 3-year period like Conte. Yes, they're both very big clubs. So I think Fenerbahce it's a bit like a foot manager team, right? It's one of those, you go amongst all your top teams, you go across Italy, you go across England, Portugal, Spain. You might, hit another continent amongst that with another big club, or merry-go-round back to another one. And I think Mourinho's done a bit of that. And when you sort of see foot manager appointments, right, you get to see the most random appointments, a bit like how we've seen Kompany at Bayern Munich, right? But this is sort of one of those movements, and it is a little bit surprising, but actually it makes a lot of sense because they're a very good side. He wants to go up for a challenge. Imagine him winning the Turkish league, what a very, very historic and big league. Another league title to add to it, to his belt. And as much as people will argue the Mourinho and Pep sort of argument, then he could sort of go, actually, I went out to Turkey, I've done this. I went out to Italy, I've done this. And, we said last week whether Pep might go out to Juve. And if he does, then he's obviously going to emulate Mourinho in some capacity. But I think Mourinho's looking at other ways now to sort of add other experiences onto his belt where he can take that next way of going, do you know what, I achieved this, this, and this, which Pep Guardiola hasn't done. I've done it on X, Y, and Z budget. And when I was reading a lot of the tweets and the replies to it, I think a lot of the fans are in response to saying that to Mourinho now, and starting to actually, he's worked on a small budget at Porto, at Roma, at now Fenerbahce if he goes there. So what's your thoughts on this one? Sideways move, bad move, positive move? What's your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I think it's a positive move as well. I think for Turkish league, I mean, it shows. Well, it's a very passionate league over there, isn't it? With Galatasaray, Fenerbahce, all them big sides, and I think again that could really help Fenerbahce push on to that next level now, because they get into European football quite regular, but it'd be good to see them get to further stages in Europe. Really, a club of that ilk, if you like, needs something like that. Mourinho's the man. I still am ruined to this day, even really as a Spurs fan, that I wish he was given that Carabao Cup final. If he would have won that Carabao Cup final, it could have been a different outlook for us. And who knows, he still might have been there this season, just gone now, and we might have gone on to be pushing for even more things, because that's what Mourinho is. He's a serial winner wherever he goes. And to be fair, yeah, football at times wasn't fantastic, but he knows how to win football games, and again, that's something in his ways of his principles of his coach and his management and that enables him to do so. So I wish him well at Fenerbahce, and I hope it really goes well, that he competes in Europe, competes in the league, and yeah, maybe if he does that, then it'd be another, I suppose, stabbing the eye for Daniel Levy.
I think there'll be a little bit of that, and hopefully it is as well, because I think if Conte and Mourinho go on to win other cups, and say they don't have another season with Postecoglou where they don't win a cup, but again, Europe is still good. I think as an achievement. I think you build upon that. That's your foundations. But for a lot of people say that Mourinho's finished, right? But in the last 8 years, right, since being with Man United, he's worked across United, Spurs, and Roma, and he's maintained a very good record across all clubs. Positive goal difference, more wins than losses. His only time where at Roma has just dropped below 50% for the first time since he ever started managing. So that's his current lowest, is currently with Roma. But obviously since that time between United, Spurs, and Roma, he won the EFL Cup, the Community Shield, the Europa League. He won the UEFA Europa Conference League. He was the Europa League runner-up. He took them to the Carabao Cup final. He finished second with United. He qualified again for Europe with Roma. So to say a manager like that is finished, but yet for him to still be bagging out achievements in the last 8 years like he has, I think he's still up there as a world-class manager, and what he brings, and regardless of whether he moves to Fenerbahce and people say, oh, do you know what, it's not United, it's not your Chelsea, it's not your Inter Milan, it's not your Real Madrid. But you know what? It's a historic club, like you said, and if you can get them back into Europe, get them competing and add that onto his list of achievements, then mate, I just think he solidifies himself in history as one of the greatest managers ever. And I think he's going to have potential contract clause in there as well for if the Portuguese national job comes knocking, he will go for that job. So personally, I think it's Fenerbahce, the Portuguese national side. Then I think you'll have one more club job after that and he'll be finished. But for me, I think it's a positive appointment.
Yeah, 100% agree with you.
But just before I was doing some preparation for this call tonight, again, whereby that sort of delay is been beneficial, because this sort of video came out.
Did you decide?
Not yet, not yet. I decided I want to go, but it's not done yet. I cannot confirm officially. But yes, I want to go.
Champions League as well, of course.
Hard, because we have 3 rounds to go in qualification, and in Fenerbahce's case 8 players are in the Euros and they are not coming for pre-season before the first round. So hard, but if I go, you know that I like challenges, so if I go, we are going to fight to be in the Champions League.
Great.
So nothing confirmed yet, but he definitely wants to go. He's already obviously looking at the squad. He's already having some planning thoughts for next season and looking at the Champions League rotations. But what's your thoughts on the response to that video, which literally came out before we came on call?
I think it's pretty much all but guaranteed that he's going there. And I think it's good that he's looking at it open-minded as well. He's aware of a situation that he's facing with the European situation, with not having them key players that will be up for Euros. But it's right, he does love a challenge. And again, that's what makes Mourinho Mourinho. He is a special one in that respect, because a lot of people would look at that and think, oh, when I say a lot of people, some high-end managers would look at that and think, oh, that that might not appeal to me, having that challenge of going through extra qualifications and everything like that. But that, again, if he installs that mentality early on, that's only a good thing for Fenerbahce in the long run.
I completely agree, and I think when he went out to, Mourinho is my sort of role model in football, and he is someone that I follow. So unfortunately, when he was at Spurs, I had to watch a lot of Spurs games because I was completely behind him, and I was rooting for Spurs because I didn't want him to be unsuccessful. And it was difficult because when I watched the Chelsea games, I didn't want Spurs to win, but I didn't want us to beat Spurs either. So it was a very catch-22 situation. But when he went to Roma, I bought a Roma shirt. Now he's at Fenerbahce, I'll probably buy a Fenerbahce shirt, and I think he is box office, and I think he takes fans with him. So even if he doesn't have success on the pitch, I think he'll bring revenues into that club. I think he'll bring history there, and I think he'll contribute that to the next level. But I think it's very tough going into that because they had 38 games this year in the league. They won 31. They had 6 draws and only 1 loss in 38 league games. They scored 99 with 31 goals conceded, a 68 goal difference with a total of 99 points and second position. So that is a tough position to take over to build upon, just having a 1 loss. And, immediately if you're 4 games in and you lose 1, you're already as bad as the last manager from next year. So huge pressure there for the next 34 games if that was to happen, for example.
That's incredible, isn't it? That is, it's just outstanding and staggering, really, when you put it into context like that. Um, yeah, would Mourinho probably Mourinho would look into that sort of thing as well, because he's very not subconscious, but you know what I mean. He's got that sort of mentality that he just wants to get even better than from before. So, and I mean, fair play to. I mean, who was the manager there this season?
Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure, but I think you're under that pressure then because if you only get that 1 loss within that game, right, then you're already under pressure from last year. So you have to build upon sort of what you've done from last year, and it's a difficult sort of position to go into, right? And he has to go in there and he has to win the league. But looking at statistics, right, I know I've just presented them to you, and the data set is what it is, and it is very difficult to go in. But if he does go in and then it doesn't necessarily mean that the team in front of him are going to have the same success that they've had this year. They might end up having a few losses, and suddenly Mourinho's in there with Fenerbahce. But just having a quick look, their last manager, Ismail Kartal, so he's actually Turkish himself. This was his second run at the third run at the job. He had assistant role once before that, and he only lost 6 in 57 games in a year and a half or so, and he leaves with 79% win percentage, and he only won the Turkish Cup in 2014. So even though he was reappointed and he's had 2 runs since 2014 again as manager, one in 2022 and one in 2023 to 24, he's only won the 1 Turkish Cup. So I suppose even though the data there says, right, he's got 79% win ratio from 23 to 24, 6 losses in 57 games, only 1 loss in the league there, second place. He's only won 1 cup, and he hasn't done that since 2014. So his last 2 spells in the sort of last 2 years, he hasn't won anything at all. So for Mourinho, as much as there's pressure on that league table, looking at the data in a sort of flip side there actually is less pressure. So if he brings a cup in and he qualifies for Europe and say he's finished second, he's already actually done a lot better than the manager of the year before, even though he could end up having, say, more losses in the year. And I know it's all perspective, but that's sort of a flip on sort of the data I just presented to you.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear that. Football's a mad game. It's just bonkers, isn't it?
Absolutely bonkers. I'm talking about bonkers, mate. You touched upon it already, but this man, the big company, the man in charge at Bayern Munich, what's your thoughts?
Right, who's turned the football manager editor button on?
I think that's true, though, mate. True. Mourinho at Fenerbahce, Kompany going from Burnley to Bayern, certainly an interesting one.
It is. I I still don't know how. I still feel a bit perplexed, I suppose. I mean, they obviously see something in Company's game that they really like, and I'm not saying that's a dismissive thing towards Company for what, as you said last episode, that with what he's achieved and everything like that by getting Burnley promotion and everything like that and so forth. But I'm still perplexed by it. But if again, German league in for Bundesliga is a lot different to Premiership, isn't it? And different budgets are coming into play and different expectations. I mean, Company we were saying Mourinho being a serial winner as a manager, but Company was a very serial winner as a player. Um, so it could be that it does work out for him at Bayern because of their traditions, their background, their history. I just really hope for his sake that they appreciate it might take a bit of time for him to find his feet. Sorry, but they've just got to be patient with it and let this project take place as well with how we would like it to.
And I think it's there. They need to give him time. And Bayern are one of those clubs where, again, they've proved that with Tuchel. If they're sitting second, they're going to go on and sack you, right? But they have to give him time as a young manager. And know it's only third role in football. And it's difficult because they want to compete and they don't want to keep conceding the title. They want to push in Europe. They want to show that they're a dominant force. But it's also one of those whereby Company can be a long-term manager. I see a lot of positives in this, right? So obviously he's only had 1 year in the Premier League, and people go, "Oh, he just got relegated, and that's what qualifies you for the Bayern job." Well, actually, they see potential, as you just said. So he had a very good season in the Championship the year before. Okay, the Championship is very different to the Prem, but the Championship is a very competitive league, and he's just won that league. So again, Chelsea are looking at another Championship manager in Maresca by appointing him. So it's the very same. If Chelsea are doing it, Bayern are doing it. So they're seeing something bigger rather than just going, right, the Championship managers. And, actually, Maresca's never managed in the Premier League. Well, Company has actually got that 1 year sort of experience upon him. Company's also proven that there's an argument that he spent a lot of money and built a squad to his way at Burnley. But unless you're spending, again, what we've seen, only 8 clubs out of 20 having positive goal difference. That's a total of 12 other clubs in the negative. So it's very difficult to get out of that unless you've got that sort of big sort of spend budget and being in that position to be there and compete. But I think you'll go into Bayern. I think you'll do well with the players because he already speaks German fluently. He's already worked with Leroy Sané. He wants to try and bring in the Arsenal left back Zinchenko. So he's already trying to establish what he wants to do, put his lieutenants in place. And I am firmly positive that he will have a good season. And I think even if he does finish his second, I think he will get another season because I think Bayern are sort of doing what Bayer Leverkusen have done. They've looked at a Xabi Alonso and gone, actually, they've given him time. He's been successful. We can do the same thing here rather than going, right, 10 million for a Tuchel or 10 million then for a Conte or another 10 million there for a Mourinho if it doesn't work out and they got to sack him or they got to pay compensation. I think this is, yes, they paid 10 mil for Company in his compensation package, but this is an opportunity to bring someone young, someone new through rather than just going through all the other serial managers, which are sort of part and parcel of the game, who are the only ones available. So they're probably looking at the next step to them. So I think it's a positive one, to be honest.
Yeah, although I was sounding quite critical, putting things into perspective with what you've just said, it's very true. I think it's actually quite a refreshing approach to football, especially with for Bayern to Chelsea. But as you said, and hit for now on the head there, really, I think because of what Leverkusen, with that model that they've brought in with Alonso, it's made other clubs wanting to feel like this, that feel that way, if you like, and try something a bit different, a bit unique. Yeah, I mean, it'd be very interesting to see how he gets on, and I do wish him well because I think he's a proper football man, isn't he? He doesn't carry much of an ego about him as such or anything like that. He genuinely has a big heart, so I wish him well with it.
I completely agree with you, and he's definitely a person-centered approach because I listened to his press conferences and I've listened to some of the other interviews he's had already with the Bayern sort of media team, and he just talks about meeting with the players, working with the players, getting to know them, building those relationships, creating the positives. Then it's going to be everything external to that. So then it's the fans. Then it's going to be the football that follows. But he wants to do it from the players and he puts them first. But this is a very good sort of data set. And I think, I'm quite big on data, to be honest, George. And I think the next managers who sort of crops up, you sort of compare and go, actually, Vincent Kompany's a great appointment for his post, right? So at Anderlecht, he had 92 games. He won 42 of those and drew 32. He only lost 18 in 92 games. He had 46% win percentage, and he was the Belgian Cup runner-up and second place runner-up in the league. At Burnley, he managed 96 games with 41 wins, 24 draws, 31 losses, considering he had a Premier League season in there as well. His win percentage is 43%, and he won the championship and won promotion with them. So not bad in sort of 3 years management period for Burnley and Anderlecht. So Anderlecht obviously being his first job, Burnley being a second job coming up to the Premier League. We know being the toughest league in the world, but I think that's a pretty decent record. So again, I see positives and I see a lot which surrounds Kompany. But this man, very questionable move. Rooney.
Yes. Yeah, I was when I saw that announcement from Plymouth, I was actually a bit what's the word? I was very I suppose disappointed, but there's more than a word to that. I was underwhelmed, I suppose. Because I felt that Plymouth, they stabilised him for championship. But I mean, first half of the season they did brilliantly, I think, in the championship, if I remember rightly, back on arrival. After his escapade with Birmingham, if I was a Pilgrims fan, that would underwhelm me a lot, really, because I know that there's other managers out there that could have helped us get to more higher heights, I suppose. Rooney, I mean, again, he signed quite long contracts as well, which you could say again a project. But if it was to go all peaks on and that Rooney, if you like, they was fighting and starving off relegation again, then it's going to be I would assume a very hefty compensation fee for Plymouth to pay out of his contract. So yeah, I felt a bit underwhelmed about that with Plymouth. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think I was listening to Rooney on the overlap a couple of weeks before, and he said, you know what, I actually wouldn't mind taking an assistant role. I wouldn't mind going in and learning. And I know he was joking a bit about Pep and going in, because Pep sort of responded to some of the media work which he'd done leading up to a City game. But I think he actually needed to go in and spend a bit of time out, a bit like Lampard has at the moment. So I know Lampard's been in and around the Euro squad watching, and he's doing a lot of learning alongside it. But I think Rooney needs to sort of have that. And I think he talked about in his interview again on the overlap this week, where Gary Neville done the two-piece series with him, and he was saying how quick his job turnaround has been. So when he sort of went from player coach to being a manager at Derby within less than a month, then he was at DC United, and then I think it was like a 24-hour period. He was from DC United to Birmingham, and now it's 6 weeks or whatever that is. Again, a very short period. But slightly longer than his previous ones, and he's already gone into Plymouth. And I think what you said there about a 3-year contract, that's a huge risk for Plymouth. I could understand the 2-year one, but a 3-year one is sort of that risk factor, especially if they start lingering around towards the bottom of the table. If they sort of linger around sort of mid-table or between 10 and 20th kind of thing, and they're not in that relegation battle, and they can see improvements for year 2. And again, he sort of sits in that bracket, and then in year 3 to go, Joe, actually, we haven't built upon him now. It's January and we can sack him. Then it might make a little bit of sense then. But I think they got a big risk factor. I think, even if you look at the data, again, he's someone who is very difficult. And I was listening to the interview with Plymouth CEO and Simon Jordan the other day, and the CEO was like, actually, we're looking at different data sets. We pulled out a different sort of perspective on Rooney rather than just what his managerial record says at the moment. And it's difficult because there is no sort of Rooney DNA at the moment. There is no way of him sort of showing actually like a bit like a company. This is how I want to play, and I'm going to be very rigid towards it. And there is potential in what I'm going to see. And then if you look at my managerial statistics, then you can go actually. So actually, there's some really good foundations there we can appoint him. But Rooney at Derby County, 85 games, 24 wins, 22 draws, 39 losses with 28% win ratio. DC United, 53 games, 14 draws, 14 losses, 14 draws, 14 wins, 25 losses, 26% win ratio, so 28% to 26. Birmingham, 15 games, 2 wins, 4 draws, 9 losses, and 13% win ratio. So that is not even a third of the games that he has even won. And that's the sort of appointment that he's been made to Plymouth. So I'd be very worried if I was a Plymouth fan just looking off some of the data statistics there, or, again, watching some of the football. I think if they were to go back and watch some Birmingham games, there was no real identity or way of playing. So bit of a risk factor.
To be fair, 2 things I'm going to add on to that. One, this might sound controversial, even though for stats are showing. I mean, for media, I know that they had a points deduction, I think, Derby anyway, when he was there and that. But they was all bigging up Rooney, saying what a great job he did. Personally, I was thinking, what planet are you on? Because, I mean, Derby, even though they had that point deduction, they still had one of the pretty decent budgets in League One at the time, with good standards. I would say top end League One, even bottom half Championship players in there. And he still couldn't manage to get them up, really, in the grand scheme of things, despite the point deduction. That might sound a bit critical. But second point that you said there about Birmingham, I mean, I've got a friend that's a Birmingham City supporter, and he said that, he's got a season ticket there, and he said with Rooney, with the football that was being displayed there, as you say, no identity, there was no purpose, there was no fight, there was no passion, there was no, there was nothing. And he said to me that I just wish that we sacked John Eustace, which was again very unusual move from us to go to Rooney when we was doing really well with Eustace. So I think there's a lot of resentment there that there is still got a lot to prove, Rooney, and undoubtedly I think he's got to. I just hope it works out for him at Plymouth. But again, I just feel that I don't know. It seems like he's, and this is not in a negative way, I suppose. But if he's been at Derby, Plymouth, even though Derby's had a bit of a heftier budget, but Derby, Plymouth, and Birmingham, these 3 clubs, they don't ride on big budgets either. Is Rooney one of them sort of managers that, though he's been given these jobs, does he need again that sort of kickstart with a budget to get him to get his ways across with management? I don't know. But yeah, all I'm just going to end on that, I think, for now, is I just wish Plymouth well with it, because it just doesn't look good, does it, with the statistics side of things?
And I sit in the same boat as you, because as much as we're critical, and I think that's the point of the podcast really, is to be critical and then sort of contribute our thoughts towards what's going on in the football world. And I was going to say to you upon an earlier appointment, there's a lot of negativity around some of the managerial appointments. So a lot of the English media would be like, oh, why are we appointing him, or why are we doing that? And there's always negativity around no matter what manager it is, right? But I think for Rooney, I think we've been critical of him, and I want him to do well as a manager. I want him to be a good young English coach. I want him to present himself and be up there challenging. He's on his 4th job and he's only 38, so that's a little bit of a question mark at the moment. But I hope he does go in and does well at Plymouth. I hope he can have some stability there, and I hope he comes out of it at least in some positive part and has a portfolio where he can build upon that and really take it forward. But I think it'd be good to see him come back in. He's obviously very energetic towards it. He's obviously very resilient. He's a strong character. I think he had good foundations at Derby County. I think, Lampard showed how he was competing with Derby and unlucky not to get him promoted. And then they went to Philip Cocu after Lamps left. And then obviously Rooney took over then. And they've not done anything major since Rooney in terms of Derby County. So I think that just shows that he did have a bit of good stability there. Obviously, a chance to go back out to America because he played at DC United. So I think that presented itself. And then obviously Birmingham came in after it didn't work out. So his DC United record, even though his win percentage is low, his record actually isn't too bad. So he's done okay at Derby, he's done okay at DC, and he didn't do so well at Birmingham. So on that sort of other flip side, that's what Plymouth are probably looking at, and I think they're building upon that as well. So I think there is scope there for Rooney. But I think moving on from sort of a championship sort of consideration and building upon a man who's recently left Burnley, there's also another consideration is this man, Steve Cooper. So he's currently been linked with the Brighton job. He's also been linked with Burnley and Leicester as well. So apparently he's not that interested in Burnley. He's more interested in Leicester and maybe Brighton. And he was linked with Brighton before they made their appointment to De Zerbi. And I think there's a lot of positive thoughts. I really like Steve Cooper, right? I think he's got a good record. I think he's got good experience. I think he's done well as a manager. He's got a good way of playing. And I feel there's a lot of positives if he is to go into Brighton. But reading through the comments and some of the tweets and replies, a lot of the Brighton fans aren't happy going from De Zerbi to Cooper. But what's your thoughts on Steve Cooper? Is he a good appointment? Is he sort of a sideways one? Is he a backwards one almost? What are you thinking about it?
I think Brighton will be a good fit for him. Just his whole model with football. I think it just fits well. I still feel that he got harshly done by Forest, considering they brought Nuno in and really there was no real change, was there? It shows that I think that was a bit finger trigger happy there, really, by pressing for sack button. But by and large, he's got a very good background. I mean, he was in England set up for a bit, wasn't he, as well? Yeah, I just think, again, with younger players, he's got a knack of developing younger players, and that's what Brighton's ethos, their philosophy is, if you like. He's bringing younger players through or buying younger players from other clubs and developing them on. And I think Steve Cooper's the right man to do that. And I think, actually, Cooper could actually bring more to the table than De Zerbi did, even though De Zerbi played good football. I think Cooper could bring more to the table.
I'm glad you said that in terms of the young players, because that's something that I was looking at, and that's why I'm a big fan of Steve Cooper. And I think even if Brighton do appoint him and they only give him a 2-year contract, I think he goes in, gives him a bit of stability, and then they might go and build upon it and go, right, let's try and get someone else in, a bit like West Ham have done on top of Moyes. And it's going to be questionable whether Lopetegui's going to be successful. But I think a former national team manager, former Real Madrid manager, former Seville manager who's managed across Europe coming in, I think there's a lot of positives to be had in that appointment. But for Cooper, yes, okay, he hasn't managed to those sort of levels, but he's managed at Swansea City and he's done quite well in the Championship with them. And Graham Potter done well in the Championship with them, and he stepped up and went to Brighton and done a good job. Steve Cooper has been linked with the national team job in recent weeks, but they've come out and said they're sticking with Rob Page. So I think he's a manager where if someone said, right, if Wales sacked Rob Page, would you take him? I'd be like, absolutely yes. I said, he will probably be on my long list as well for the English national team management job as well, because I think he's got a lot of potential. He won the Under-17s World Cup, and to some people that means nothing, but building young players and having them contribute to Brighton. And in his first year at Nottingham Forest, he finished in 13th place. His second season was in 17th, but as you said there, Nuno didn't come in and go, right, it takes Forest up to 12th. He had them in the same position. So I think he was a little bit undone there. And I think although you go, oh, yeah, he finished 17th, well, actually, he's done a good across his 2 seasons. He averages 48% win ratio. So I think there's a lot of potential in Cooper, and it'd be nice to see him at Brighton for a year or two, just for him to come in, prove himself a little bit more, and then see where he goes on from there. But I personally like Steve Cooper, and I think it's going to be interesting in terms of where he goes next. But I think this is quite an interesting one that I read earlier. Ruud van Nistelrooy to Leicester City. I'm not sure if you know much about the Ruud since he's been managing, but the Foxes apparently have been linked to Frank Lampard, but Burnley have also been linked heavily with Frank Lampard, which we'll come on to shortly. But when I read this one, I felt a lot of positivity around it, as I felt with Steve Cooper, as I felt with Vincent Kompany. But What's your feelings on this one?
To be fair, I don't know. I haven't followed Van Nistelrooy in terms of management much, actually. But again, I think that could be a good position in top flight management anyway. With a Premiership team, Leicester could be the right one for him. Only concern is with their financial fair play, and that could deter a lot of managers to go there if they are on a hefty points deduction to start with. But I think again with Van Nistelrooy, he was part of Sir Alex's successful sides at United, and that wasn't he? As a player, I think it'd be an interest. I mean, I don't know too much. I mean, you might be able to tell me more, Luca, but I do think it'd be an fascinating appointment to follow if he was to be given the job for sure.
I like what you said there about financial fair play. So just to interject before we move on to the Van Nistelrooy in a little bit depth, but I think that's why Lamps would go into Leicester City if he was offered the job, because he's proven that he can work under transfer embargoes, and how he proved himself at Chelsea, how he can work with no budget, and how he can work with younger players and bring them through. And obviously he has that Premier League experience. It didn't work out so well at Chelsea as interim manager, and I think he done okay personally at Everton. So I think that's why they would consider him, and it would make a lot of sense just for Lamps to go in for that 2-year period. But in terms of Van Nistelrooy, he's a bit like a Maresca / Xabi Alonso in a way, because he's like Maresca, whereby he has some experience and he is a bit of a bit of a punt on him, because it's only his second job if he was to get this in senior team management. And he's a bit like Xabi Alonso, whereby he's managed a second team like Alonso did, and then he stepped up to the first team. So he managed PSV's second team, and then he went on to manage the first team at PSV. And I think he had a bit of a fallout with the board at the time. And I think he was on the overlap when I listened to this episode, and I think he touched upon that, but didn't go into too much great detail on it for some obvious reasons when managers do get sacked. But at PSV, he had 51 games. He won 33 of them with 10 draws, only lost 8 games in 51. 126 goals scored, conceded 60, so 66 positives, 65% win ratio. He won the Dutch Cup and the Johan Cruyff Shield. So personally, as someone who is, again, a bit like a Kompany, a bit like a Xabi Alonso, a bit like a Maresca, I think he would make a positive appointment on that foundation in terms of what he's done at PSV to come in to Leicester to build upon what Maresca's done in his style, to then build his experience in the Premier League. Sort of, you could think he's sort of a bit like a Patrick Vieira, though, and just coming in and sort of not really improving Leicester and not really having them in a relegation zone, but sort of a bit of a risk factor around it. And then whether he proves it to be right in terms of that risk factor, or whether he proves them wrong and has a lot of success. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked around Van Nistelrooy, but for me, if I would be like 70-30 in terms of positive to negative, but giving you some data set on that, building upon your thoughts.
I think that's very fascinating, though, Luke, what you said. And I don't know what it is with Leicester as such, because I don't follow them as much, even though I've got a Leicester supporter mate, and maybe I should ask him more. But they always seem to, I suppose, hit nail on the head when it comes to manager appointments, though. I mean, Maresca that's just came in. We've had Brendan Rodgers that came in that won the FA Cup with them. There was obviously Ranieri that was there that won the title. They've got a knack of appointing good people. And this could be a very well calculated risk.
I think so, and I think there's a lot of potential in this one. So I'd actually like to see him go into Leicester City. But just to touch upon that, obviously Lampard, as said, has been linked with the Burnley job. I think, again, the Championship with Derby County, he proved himself, and I think him dropping back down to the Championship now again, is an opportunity to rebuild, to try and get a Burnley side back up to the Prem. And I think if he was to get them up to the Prem and they weren't performing, I think then they'd make that decision of sacking a manager then at that point. So not like keeping a company, but going in and going, right, let's get someone who can keep us up. And maybe then they go for, an experienced Moyes or someone like that, right? But your thoughts on Lampard? Good manager, bad manager, potential to be a good manager?
Again, I think he got, I mean, because you're a Chelsea fan, Luffy, you might tell me differently. But I think he got harshly done at Chelsea when he did get the sack, considering because he got you guys Europe, didn't they? If I remember rightly. And then at Everton, I think considering for circumstances now that we know that Everton are in, I think he did a good job there, really, considering, especially in top flight. After the Chelsea setback, Burnley, I think with that, I think it's a good fit. It continues with Burnley's new tradition of what they're trying to bring into their football club with younger managers and people that have had good standing of game like with Company. But I think Company, again, credit where it's due in that sense, has helped put Burnley on for just that bit more. And it makes it a very appealing project um, for any new manager, I suppose, because it seems like the owner there, I've forgotten his name, American fella.
Foley.
Yeah, it's I think with Burnley, they don't. I mean, despite getting for promotion and then going up, he wasn't in a rush to sack the company, despite the results going wrong. He stuck with him all throughout the season, so that's a testament to the Burnley owner on that. And I do think that Lampard will be a good fit there. And as you say, developing younger players. Burnley. I'm just trying to think of Burnley youth. Really, I don't know much about Burnley youth, but again, you'll get a younger side in there that will be hungry and ready to compete up there to bounce back into the Premiership should he get for job with Burnley, of course.
Apologies, mate. I thought you meant the Chelsea owner in Todd Bowley, but the Burnley owner is JJ Watt. But I think again it is very similar in terms of one manager, one owner giving a manager trust and one owner not. So again, I think you've sort of done over a bit of Chelsea, but I think we've done over a lot of managers, to be honest. So you could say the same for Mourinho, you can say the same for Tuchel, you can say the same for Lamps, you can say the same for Ancelotti, maybe Conte, maybe Sarri as well. So there's a lot of managers, maybe Di Matteo in there, maybe AVB can be argued to an extent. But I think it was refreshing for Burnley to stick with Kompany, and even though they were going down, I think they sort of proved, we're going down, but we got a manager who get us back up. Whereas Sheffield done the thing of where teams are in that relegation zone, they sack a manager and then they try to get someone else in, and it backfired on them a little bit. So you can understand sort of both perspectives, but I think Burnley have ended up compensating in a very positive way. They've lost Kompany, which is a bit of a drawback for them, but I think they made a good compensation package off him. There is a good squad there, and I think they could sell some players off for the next manager, or go, do you know what, we're not going to buy those players like we did for Kompany. But again, if they don't get that promotion, I think then those questions come in and going, well, actually, you didn't invest what you did in Kompany side, etc. So I think Lamps would build upon that, and I think as some of the squad players that we have at Chelsea, I think we could see a very good set of players coming in on loan from Chelsea if that was to happen. I think Maresca being a championship manager and proving how good players can build upon that would sort of loan players out as well. So I think that would still establish itself in a positive mindset. So I think that's a positive in terms of that sort of perspective.
I
But
totally agree with you there. I mean, I think it's what we were saying about Company being a good football man. Lampard is also a good football man. No ego about him as such at all. Well, at all really, for that matter. That's where I think it'll go wrong with Plymouth and Rooney, unfortunately, because of Rooney's standing a bit of his ego ways. That's where it go a bit peaked on, I think, on Plymouth side.
And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think, again, Lampard's got a bit of an ego, but it doesn't come across in a way as Rooney comes across. And I think it's that good sort of football person which comes first in Lamps. And I think for me, I look at him and I feel a coach, I feel a manager. Whereas Rooney, I feel like you're not established yet. You need to go back and be a coach, maybe. But I think Lamps would be good with a youth job at the national team level, for example. And I think under some stewardship of Gareth Southgate, again, people might question that and go, "Oh, do you know what? Southgate isn't a great manager." I think he's a fantastic manager, right? I think there's times when he gets tactical decisions wrong, and I think that's like any manager. And I think he's given us good stability. But I think going into that side with a Steve Holland as assistant manager, with Jimmy Floyd, Hasselbank, with Chris Powell and Hasselbank have both been managers themselves, and they stepped up into coaching roles with the national team, and they're sort of learning from that. And I think that's what Lampard needs as well. So again, I want us to be supportive of a young English manager and upcoming managers who can really put themselves forward, because when we talk about English managers, we always complain there's not enough, and then when they don't perform, we're very easy to criticize them. So if you look at English managers, our probably current top tier English manager right now is Eddie Howe. Who's behind Eddie Howe then? Well, you start the question then. Well, Roy Hodgson's retired. Then you've got Lampard now, and then you've got maybe Steven Gerrard out in Saudi Arabia. He's on the list somewhere. You've got Wayne Rooney coming through. Whether Liam Rosenthal comes back as a manager at some point. So we need to get these managers into these roles and get them these jobs and get behind them a little bit, rather than sort of sacrificing them. And maybe then the other English manager then is Sean Dyche. So our innings as a future manager in terms of keeping that sort of national identity is becoming very few. So again, I'm behind Lampard. I like him. I see positives in him, and I wish him the best of luck. And I hope he gets into a job and does well.
Totally, and I think I can see it as well that he was a blooming good leader for Chelsea as well. When John Terry was absent, Lampard stepped up to the plate, and I can see him, be a very good leader as a manager as well.
I think so, and I think he just needs to be given a bit of time now and just get his teeth into something and be settled. But in terms of ex-Chelsea managers, before I move on to the Champions League teams, before we build up for kickoff in 25 minutes' time, and making sure we are sticking on schedule as much as we can, mate. But one that I was very interested in, and this one was the appointment of Emma Hayes.
From a household of passionate football fans, and for me, this is such a privilege to do a job that I absolutely love doing, and coaching, watching, being involved with this magnificent sport is, for me, such a joy, and being back in America is such a joy.
I don't know how much you follow women's football to some extent, but I tend to follow it. I'm not religious in it like I am for the male game, but I know sort of my innings around it, and I can give a perspective. But I like Emma Hayes. I think she's a good appointment for the US national team. I think she's a big personality, and I think she'll do a good job out in the US. But I'm not sure how much you follow women's football.
No, to be fair, like you, I don't follow it much, but Emma Hayes, with what she did, she was with Chelsea ladies, wasn't she? Yeah. She had a lot of success with Chelsea ladies as well, as I'm sure, and I think she'll take the USA ladies to good heights, or lower, from what I can understand as well. For USA have got good history with women's football anyway, haven't they?
Yeah, and she originally coached out in the US before coming back to Chelsea, or coming into Chelsea. So she knows a few of the players of her time of scouting, and some of the foundations when she was out in the US. She had a very good Chelsea record. She pretty much won everything in terms of Chelsea. So the new Chelsea female manager is a great appointment. So we'll sort of touch upon her as the weeks come out a little bit. But big fan of Emma Hayes. I think she's got a big personality. I think she does well. And they're just preparing for the Olympics themselves now, the US national team. So best of luck to her. But just moving on to the Champions League teams. This is how the teams are looking for tonight. So I've taken this from UEFA.com. However, just looking at Twitter earlier, as the call has gone on, and just making sure that all the information is up to date. There's been a slight change in terms of that squad for Real Madrid. So a very good Real Madrid side there. An interesting one is Kurt Hoyce coming back into the lineup after spending the season out injured. So if you're that, I know the second team keeper who has stood up all year is on illness now tonight, But if you're that keeper who has been dropped from the Champions League final, you spent all season as number one in the sticks, and then suddenly a goalkeeper who's been out injured is coming to take your place, how do you feel about that as a goalkeeper or anyone being replaced?
You'd feel a bit, yeah, you'd feel flat, wouldn't you? I think, but I think with Courtois' background, his experience might help him get over the line tonight. Um, but I do, yeah, I, 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 that's what I felt like. I mean, I know it might be a bit different, but that's how I felt when it was the Spurs Champions League final against Liverpool a few years ago, when Fernando Llorente, who helped us get through that second leg in Ajax with Lucas Moura, and was benched for that for final against Liverpool. And we put Kane straight back in. Now I've got nothing against Kane, never had anything against Kane, and still won't. But I still question that and think it should have been the team that got us through that second leg in Ajax to start in for final, because they richly deserved it, because that was just some sort of miracle. But in terms of this situation, I mean, a goalkeeper's again with all the positions, it's very unusual for a goalkeeper to be in a swapping situation, if you like, for such a big event,
And
despite the number two being ill.
And I think so, and I think it's a bit of a tough one then because, okay, yes, it's good that the second goalkeeper's ill. So Andre Lunin, I think it's good that he is ill rather than going right. You've been dropped, so it's a little bit easier for him then to go. Actually, I was really ill. I didn't make that final, rather than going. You know, I sat on the bench, missed it entirely or whatever, right? But it is difficult sort of to be dropped after you spent all season performing so well, and that situation I think is going to crop up a little bit in our conversation about the English squad as well, and some thoughts I've got around the goalkeeping situation on that, right? But we got Carvajal at right back, we got Eder Milito, Rudiger, Mendy, the defensive line for Real Madrid. We got Kavinga, who sits in a CDM role in this one, but actually Kavinga and Cruz are going to be sitting as two centre midfield. So, Valverde is actually going to be in the lineup now, so he's going to be playing as the 10. And then we got Vinny and Rodrigo on the left and right, and then Bellingham playing up top as the striker then. So still a 4-3-3, just Kavinga moves out to Valverde, and Valverde sits in that 10 position there. And rather than having that CDM, it's more of a cam position in there. But a very, very strong lineup for Real Madrid there. A good lineup for Dortmund as well. So we got Kobel, goalkeeper, Ryerson, right back, Hummels and Schlotterbeck as centre backs, Matson at left back, Emre Can and Shabitz at centre mids or CDMs, if you like, Adiemi at right side, Jadon Sancho left side, which I hope he does well in Champions League tonight, and Brandt in that cam position with Falk up front. So again, this is sort of a concept one for Dortmund based off UEFA.com, but the Real Madrid lineup has been confirmed by Fabrizio Romano, and I think the Dortmund side would have just been released now with 20 minutes to go on kickoff. But for you, on your thoughts and where your money is going tonight, who are you rooting for this Champions League final? So just to put on a little bit of a thought process there. This is Marco Reus's last game for Dortmund, so he could leave as a Champions League winner and bow out as a legend of the club and finish on a high. Or you've got a young Jude Bellingham who finishes with a Champions League, going into an English squad ready for the Euros as a Champions League winner. Sort of as an English fan between us and looking at sort of legends of the game versus a little bit of passion for a national team, just to add that into the mix. But who's your money on, mate?
I think it's going to be a tight game. I think Real are favourites, aren't they? I can see this going to a penalty shootout.
Interesting.
A penalty shootout with a Madrid win.
Very interesting, mate. So penalty shootout with a Madrid win for Jordan. I'm going to say 2-1 to Dortmund in the full time. That's my thoughts on it. So that's how we're concluding this episode, and I think we're going to find out once kickoff commences in 19 minutes of how the results play out over the night. So again, very interesting. I think it's great to have that Champions League final and to certainly look at everything that's happened over the last week, the preparation for pre-season. I think we're looking forward to some more content coming. We're looking forward to already this time next year kind of thing. But again, it's been another top episode recorded with you, Jordan. I'm glad that you found some time in between being a football manager yourself, coming off QPR's management window for you and recording this, but making it happen in the week, mate. So I'm glad that we got a week out of 3 out of 3 finish, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great again, Luke, and really enjoyed it. We covered a lot of topics, and I think it's going to be quite interesting what happens in football over the next week as well, because I think there's going to be
Absolutely.
even more developments.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to it, mate. And well, again, 18 minutes to go till kickoff now, and I'm sure we'll be debating some of the scores as they go on. But cheers for tonight, mate. Enjoy, and I'll catch up with you shortly about the results.
And you too, mate. Thanks for your time as well, and look forward to the next.
Pleasure as always, mate. Well, I'll chat to you in a bit.
Catch you in a bit.